29 now, and I've had a lot of horrific experiences. But nothing sits in my brain the way one night from when I was 15 does. It was my first real babysitting job that wasn't just watching a cousin for an hour while my aunt ran to the store. This was a family friend, the kind where your parents know their parents, and everyone assumes it's basically safe by default. They're cool with me telling this story online, so their names are Mark and Diane, and their son Charlie was 5. They lived in a nice house in a quiet, normal neighborhood. Looking back, that's part of why it messed with me. It didn't feel like the kind of house where anything bad could happen. It felt like a normal place, like where I grew up. It was a Friday night in early fall. My parents dropped me off around 6:30, and Mark and Diane were already dressed up. Mark shook my hand like I was applying for a job at his office, and Diane kept calling me a lifesaver. Mark and Diane went over the basics, like when we eat, what we eat, when his lights out, and keeping his door cracked open. If he has to use the bathroom, walk him there, because he sometimes gets scared in the hallway at night. Mark also pointed out the locks. There was a front door lock they never used because they came in through the garage. The back door, though, was the one I'd use if I needed to step out onto the deck. He mentioned I'd have to lock both the locks, and he pointed to the deadbolt up top and the regular doorbell lock underneath. I nodded like I understood. I thought it was obvious. I thought a lock was a lock. They left around 7. As soon as their car pulled away, Charlie asked if we could play board games and hide and seek. And the hide and seek I tried to talk him out of because the house was bigger than I expected, and I didn't want him hiding somewhere stupid and getting hurt. We compromised by playing a simple card matching game at the coffee table, then a video game on the little console in the family room. It was one of those kids games where you basically just run around collecting stuff and the character can't really die. Around 7:45, I heated up the food Diana had left. It was mac and cheese and chicken nuggets, basically babysitter cheat code. Charlie ate in front of the TV, which his parents probably didn't normally let him do, but I wasn't trying to be the strict babysitter on my first paid job. After dinner, we brushed his teeth and went to his room. His room was on the 2nd floor. The house had this wide hallway that ran past a couple bedrooms and a bathroom. Charlie's room was at the end, and it had a small closet with sliding doors. Inside, from what I could tell earlier when he grabbed a toy, it was mostly little kid clothes and some storage bins on the top shelf. His room had a hamper in the corner by his dresser, one of those tall ones with a lid. There was a nightlight on his dresser that glowed soft yellow. I tucked him in and read him a short book, and as I was walking out, he asked if I'd stay in the hallway for a minute. I stood outside his door and listened to him rustle around for maybe 30 seconds. Then his voice went quiet, and I figured he was settled. I left his door cracked like they said. Diane had showed me the guest bedroom where I could hang out once Charlie was asleep. It was down the hallway from Charlie's room, closer to the stairs. It had a small TV, like a spare room TV, and a bed with a comforter that looked like it was never used. I turned the TV on and flipped through the channels until I found some random show. I lay on top of the bed, shoes off, phone in my pocket. It felt like the job was basically done, but that lasted maybe 40 minutes. I was half watching the TV when I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. I looked up, and Charlie was standing in the doorway of the guest room. He was rubbing his eyes and holding his stuffed animal. His face didn't look sleepy though. He looked scared. I asked what was wrong. He didn't come in at first. He just whispered, "Chris." I motioned him over, and he walked in slowly, like he didn't want to turn his back to the hallway. He said he heard something in his closet. I tried to assure him it was likely a house settling noise, that houses creak a lot. He shook his head fast, saying no, it was more like a scratch. I still knew it had to just be typical toddler imagination. I told him there were no monsters in his closet and asked if he wanted me to check. He nodded, and I walked him back to his room. I turned his light on fully and looked at the closet. The sliding doors were closed. I slid one open and peeked inside. Admittedly, I took just a quick peek because I knew no one was in there, and I just saw a bunch of clothes. I even pushed some clothes aside like I was actually searching. I slid the door closed and saw relief on his face. I tucked him back in and went back to the guest room, but 15 minutes later, I heard footsteps again. This time Charlie came in quicker and he was more upset. He said, "Chris, the closet door moved." I sat up and tried not to show annoyance, even though I felt it for a second. I tried to stay patient. I said, "Okay, let's go check." We walked back down the hallway, and when we got to his room, I stopped in the doorway. The closet door was fully open. One of the sliding panels was pushed all the way to the side. I stared at it for a second, and I remember my stomach doing this little drop. Not because I thought someone was in there right away, but because it didn't match what I remembered. I knew I closed it. I looked at Charlie and asked why he opened that in a tone that would imply I'm not happy, but the way he swore he didn't, it didn't come across like he was lying. I walked over and slid the closet door shut, but the thing is, the way it closed, it didn't feel like it could have drifted open on its own. I gave Charlie a look meant to imply that I knew he was playing around with the door, maybe trying to scare me. I tucked him back in and told him he was fine and to go to sleep. I left the room, and on the way back to the guest bedroom, I caught myself listening for sounds behind me, like someone was walking in the hallway. I told myself to stop being stupid. I was 15 in a family friend's house on a safe street. About 10 minutes later, instead of footsteps, I heard Charlie call out. It wasn't a scream, but rather a shaky raised voice like he was trying not to yell but needed me. It came from his room. I got up and walked out. As I got closer, I could hear him crying softly. I stepped into his room and saw him sitting in bed with tears on his face. I immediately looked at the closet. The door was closed. That should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. I said, "Hey buddy, what happened?" He didn't answer right away. He just lifted his arm and pointed toward the corner of the room. I followed where he was pointing, and for a second, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. There was a hamper in that corner, and behind it, pressed into the narrow space between the hamper and the wall, was a person crouched down. They were hiding, trying to make themselves as small as possible. The first thing I saw was a shoulder, then the shoes, then his partially hidden face, but I could see his eyes looking straight at me. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 seconds before my body reacted. I didn't scream. I simply decided it was time to move, so I grabbed Charlie with both arms, yanked him out of bed, and picked him up like he weighed nothing. I backed toward the door, never taking my eyes off that corner. The person surprisingly didn't move at first. They stayed crouched, as if they stayed still enough we'd forget he was there. I ran us toward the guest room and locked the door. I did my best to keep Charlie quiet as I called 911. I told the operator there was someone in the house. I gave the address and said I was babysitting, and there was a man in the kids' room. The operator asked if the intruder had a weapon. I said I didn't know. She asked if we were safe. I said we were locked in a bedroom upstairs. She told me to stay on the line. I kept expecting the doorknob to start turning or expecting the door to shake. The operator kept talking to me to keep me calm, asking me to describe the person, but I couldn't. All I could say was I saw the person's eyes hidden behind a hamper. The eventual sound of distant sirens getting closer was the first time I was ever relieved to hear police sirens in my life. The operator told me to wait until an officer came to my door and identified themselves. When the police finally came upstairs, one of them knocked and said, "Chris?" because I guess dispatch had my name. I unlocked the door and opened it, and 2 officers were there with flashlights. They looked past me into the room, then at Charlie. They had already done a sweep downstairs and didn't see anyone. They didn't have to kick the door down because the front door was wide open. They checked every possible hiding spot in the house. Whoever it was had left. They said based on the timeline, he probably slipped out fast when I ran, went down the stairs, and ran out the front door. When Mark and Diane got home, they arrived to the police cars outside and officers in their living room. A lot of emotions filled the room for sure. Mark asked me questions I couldn't really answer, just like the police did. A cop asked about the locks and entry points. Mark immediately went to the back door and checked it. I followed because I felt like I needed to see. The deadbolt at the top was unlocked. Mark looked at me and asked, "Did you lock both locks like I said?" I said, "I locked the bottom one." He said the bottom one pops if the knob gets jiggled. That's why he told me both. He wasn't raising his voice, but I knew he was upset. However, he didn't stay upset for long and was grateful I saved Charlie from danger. The worst part is thinking about what would have happened if Charlie hadn't come to get me, if he'd stayed in his room trying to be brave while that person was in there, or if I'd been downstairs messing around on my phone, not paying attention, or if I'd told Charlie to go back to bed without checking. So to parents or babysitters or anyone out there who takes care of kids, don't always dismiss the things they say as just their imagination. The third time I babysat AJ was the only time I was ever asked to stay overnight at someone else's house, and it's also the last time I ever babysat for anyone at all. I was 17, a senior in high school, and I had already watched AJ twice before. He was 8, quiet, and the kind of kid who didn't really look at you when you talked to him. The first time I met his mom, she told me he was a loner and mostly kept to himself, so I shouldn't expect much interaction. She said that like it was a good thing, like it meant the job would be easy, and honestly, the first 2 times kind of were. I barely had to do anything besides heat up food and remind him when it was time to get ready for bed. He'd just sit in his room playing video games like Grand Theft Auto for hours. The third time was different because his mom asked if I could spend the night. She said she had to be out of town for work and wouldn't be back until late the next morning. She sounded stressed on the phone, like she didn't have many options, so I said yes. I figured it would be the same as before, just longer and more money. When I got to the house that afternoon, she rushed through the instructions at the kitchen counter while AJ was already upstairs. She said there was frozen pizza in the freezer, and he usually fed himself breakfast cereal, and I could sleep in the extra room at the end of the hallway. She thanked me like 3 times before she even left. When she did, I called up the stairs to let AJ know I was there, even though he already knew, and he just yelled back a short "yeah" without coming down. For the next few hours, I barely saw him. I could hear the video games through the ceiling, the sounds of gunshots and cars crashing in his game. At one point, I went upstairs to check on him and found him sitting on the floor of his room, controller in hand, eyes locked on the screen. He didn't look away when I asked if he was okay. He just nodded while staring at the TV. I went back downstairs and tried to watch something in the living room, but it felt weird being in someone else's house overnight. Around 7, I made the pizza and called AJ down. When he came down, he didn't say hi or anything. He just grabbed 2 slices, looked at me with this expression I still can't fully describe, like I'd done something to annoy him just by existing, and then went back upstairs without a word. He was acting unfriendlier than usual this time. I stood there in the kitchen holding my own plate, feeling awkward and kind of unwelcome in a house I was supposed to be in charge of for the night. I figured he was just a weird kid and didn't take it personally. After I cleaned up, I went upstairs to get ready for bed. The guest room was basic and small. I left the door half open because I didn't like the idea of being fully closed in. I was sitting on the bed talking to my friend Bree when I got this strange feeling like I was being watched. I looked up and saw AJ's head slowly move back out of view from the crack in the doorway. He had just been standing there looking in. I laughed a little because it startled me more than anything, and I called out to him, asking what he was doing. He didn't answer. I heard soft footsteps go down the hallway toward his room. I remember thinking it was kind of funny, like he was just being a nosy kid, and I didn't think much of it after that. Around 11, I put my phone down and turned off the lamp. I rolled onto my side and closed my eyes, trying to fall asleep. I don't know how much time passed before I felt like I wasn't alone in the room. I opened my eyes and saw a dark shape at the foot of the bed. It took a few seconds for me to process that it was someone standing there. I let out a scream before I could stop myself and scrambled for the lamp. When I turned it on, I saw AJ standing at the end of the bed, completely still. The look on his face is still hard to describe. He looked annoyed, yet also scared or regretful of what he was about to do. Both of his hands were behind his back. I sat up and asked him what he was doing in there. He didn't answer. I told him to show me what he had behind his back. He shook his head no, still not breaking eye contact. That scared me more than if he yelled or cried. I got out of bed and moved toward him, telling him he needed to go back to his room. When I reached him, I grabbed his arm and turned him slightly, and that's when I saw the handle of a large kitchen knife in his hand. That's when I screamed again and covered my mouth with my hand without even meaning to. I yelled at him to get out of the room, to go, to leave. My whole body was shaking. He didn't argue, he just ran out into the hallway, still holding the knife. I rushed to the door, slammed it shut, and locked it. I fumbled with my phone, trying to call his mom because my hands were actually shaking. When she answered, I could barely get the words out. I told her AJ came into my room with a knife while I was sleeping. There was a long silence on the other end. Then her voice changed completely. She sounded horrified, like she had been expecting something bad, but not this bad. She kept apologizing over and over, saying she was so sorry and that she believed me. I told her I couldn't stay there. I didn't care about the money or anything else. I just needed someone else to come watch him. She didn't argue at all. She said she would call her ex-husband and have him come right away. I stayed locked in that room for almost an hour, scared shitless. Eventually, there was a knock at the front door and a man's voice calling AJ's name. I cracked the guest room door and saw a man I recognized from a photo in the house. He went straight down the hall toward AJ's room without saying much to me. I grabbed my bag, walked past them without looking into AJ's room, and left the house as fast as I could. His mom sent me the money through Venmo later that night, along with another long apology, but I never went back there. I never even babysat for another family after that. I feel like I was actually close to becoming a news article online about a babysitter getting murdered by a child. I was 21 when my sister asked me to watch her kids overnight while she and her husband went to a wedding a few hours away. I'd babysat my niece Emma and my nephew Lucas plenty of times before, so it wasn't a big deal. Emma was 6, quiet and sensitive, and Luke was 9, more talkative but still easy. They live in a normal suburban house in a quiet neighborhood not far from our childhood home. My sister walked me through the usual routine before they left, since this time I'd be staying overnight. Leftover Chinese food for dinner, and no scary shows, and bed by 9. She reminded me Emma sometimes got nervous at night and might call for me once or twice. After they left, the kids and I ate in the living room and watched a movie. It felt like a completely normal night. Around 9, I took them upstairs. Their bedrooms were across the hall from each other, with a bathroom in between. I tucked Emma in first. She asked if I'd leave her door open a little and keep the hallway light on. Lucas just rolled over and told me goodnight like he was already half asleep. I went downstairs and turned on the TV, keeping the volume low so they wouldn't hear. Around like 9:30 to 10, I heard footsteps upstairs. I figured Emma needed something. I started up the stairs, but before I got halfway, I saw her walking along the balcony toward the top step. She was standing there in her pajamas looking down at me. I asked what was wrong. She said I already came in her room and told her to go back to sleep, but she hadn't been able to. I stopped on the stairs and told her I hadn't been upstairs since I put them to bed. She thought I was joking at first. She said I stood in her doorway a few minutes ago and told her everything was fine in a whisper. I told her maybe she was dreaming it and walked her back to her room. I checked her closet and under the bed, even though I knew nothing would be there. She finally settled back in, but she kept watching me as I left, like she wasn't convinced. I went back downstairs, feeling slightly uneasy, but still telling myself kids mix dreams with reality all the time. About 20 minutes later, Lucas came down, rubbing his eyes. He asked why I came into his room. I felt a chill go through me. I told him I didn't. He said I stood by his dresser and looked at him, then walked out without saying anything. I tried to keep my voice calm and told him he must have been half asleep, but now this was weird, because both of them said pretty similar things. Instead of going back to bed, he stayed next to me on the couch now. That was when I started to really listen to the house. Every small sound felt louder. I turned the TV off, and the silence literally made my ears ring. Lucas noticed me doing this, and I think it started to scare him when I told him to shush for a second. I heard something upstairs. It was light footsteps running, and then I saw her running across the balcony upstairs and then racing down the stairs, screaming Uncle Dan a bunch of times. When she got to the living room, I asked her what's wrong, and she started crying, saying there's someone upstairs. I think this was around the time my heart really started racing. They weren't playing a little kid prank on me. She was crying genuine tears. I asked her why she thought there's someone upstairs, and she responded saying someone came in her room again and said goodnight, but it didn't sound like me. I think by now, I was internally freaking the fuck out, but I told them to keep calm. I didn't want Emma to cause Lucas to start crying now too. I told them to wait down here, I'll go check upstairs and be right back. And that's exactly what I planned to do. But I wasn't going up there without a weapon at this point. I went to the kitchen, secretly grabbed a knife, and placed it in front of me as I walked back into the living room and then up the stairs. The kids were still on the couch. I made it to the upstairs balcony that overlooks the living room. I did a little march as I walked across it to try to make them laugh, but it didn't work. As I passed the balcony and into the upstairs foyer that led to the kids' bedrooms, I can't iterate enough just how much I wasn't expecting what happened next. I heard something in Emma's room. I peered inside and thought I saw something or someone. I quietly said hello so the kids wouldn't hear, but I wasn't expecting someone to respond. In a very weird, high-pitched voice, yet still sounding like a grown man, someone said, "Aren't they just so special?" The voice sounded like it belonged to someone with mental issues, maybe not fully there. I then realized what I was seeing in the bedroom was a really tall person standing next to Emma's bed now. I guess like 6'4", they looked to be like 6 inches taller than me. My heart was in my throat. I turned and ran down the stairs and grabbed the kids. I told them, "Put your shoes on now, we're leaving," and Emma started to cry even more. I quickly saw why. Peering around the wall up the balcony upstairs was this grotesque-looking man doing peekaboo with his hands toward the kids. I said forget the shoes and ran the kids outside with me in their socks. We ran to a house a couple doors down where I saw lights on inside, and I rang the bell 5 times. The lady who answered knew Lucas and Emma. I introduced myself and quickly explained the situation. She let us in immediately into safety. I got on the phone with 911 and stood on the front porch of this couple's house watching my sister's house. And as I saw that man casually strolling out of her house, walking down the walkway into the darkness of the street in the opposite way, the 911 operator told me not to engage him in any way and that officers would be there soon. But boy do I regret listening to that operator. I should have followed that fucking creep down the street. I should have been a man and beaten him to a pulp. But realistically, I didn't know if he was armed or not, and based on his voice, I choose to believe it was some mentally handicapped person who simply walked right into the house. I stayed on the stoop watching the man until he disappeared down an intersecting street, and I told the operator which street it was. She kept making it seem like the cops would be heading down that direction, but it took so long for them to arrive that by then, that man was gone, possibly into one of the houses in the vicinity for all anyone would know. I wasn't happy with the response time, and I let the police know that. I went into my sister's house with them to investigate, and nothing seemed out of the sorts, nor was anyone else inside. Of course, given the circumstances, I drove the kids home to my parents' house with me that night to sleep there. We weren't going to sleep in that house that night regardless. And of course, there was somehow blame put on me that the one night I was watching them, someone breaks into the house. However, I firmly believe that man was in there before I even got there. I did not go needlessly unlocking doors or anything like that. Ever since then, my sister and my brother-in-law have been nuts with the security cameras. They have at least 6 all over the house, inside and out. But honestly, who can blame them after this? So I've actually got 2 stories that I think are worth hearing, and they're both related to each other. My name is David. I used to work late nights at a gas station / convenience store out in the middle of nowhere. This was forever ago, which I'm only mentioning because it was back before every establishment had state-of-the-art security systems and cameras covering every square inch of their property. It's not like security systems didn't exist, more so that it wasn't much of a priority. Plus, the owner was cheap. But anyway, I didn't care because the job was laughably easy. The most difficult part of working there was honestly the owner. He legitimately had the mind of a goldfish. We'd have the same 2 arguments multiple times a week, and it was almost like this guy forgot what we argued about every time because he'd constantly repeat himself and bring up things we'd already addressed. But whatever. Here's everything you need to know. Most nights, it was just me in there from 11 p.m. to 7 in the morning, and the place didn't see much traffic. That's about it. Anyway, one night, I'm pretty sure it was during the week, I was doing what I always did, leaning against the counter with a magazine in hand, trying to prevent the boredom from putting me to sleep. It was really late. I don't remember exactly what time it was, since the store had the remarkable ability to blend all the ungodly hours of the night into one lump of misery. But the store was dead silent. You know that faint buzzing noise those old fluorescent lights make? That was the only noise I'd hear in hours, and my brain had gotten numb to it, which I guess explains why I was so startled when the front door chimed. I looked up, and there was a man walking in. He was this tall, 30-something looking black guy with an above-average build. My first thought was ex-pro athlete, but then I looked at him a little more closely. Here's the thing, and I can't overstate how jarring this was. He was quite literally covered in blood. Or I guess it could have been red paint, but I knew it wasn't. It was everywhere. There was a huge splatter across his chest for one, not to mention the streaks on his face and arms. It was a cartoonish amount of blood, which is why my brain took so long to process it. It was one of those unique sights that paralyzes your brain for a few moments because it doesn't fit any familiar category of lived experience. But what really got me were his eyes. They were just empty. I don't know how else to describe them. There was nothing behind them. It legit looked like he was just walking into the gas station at 2 a.m. on any other night. He looked perfectly normal, like he was relaxed and almost bored. It was like he didn't even know he was drenched in what was very clearly blood. I'm describing all of this in vivid detail so that my reaction makes sense. I don't want to come across as some pathetic loser. It was genuinely a terrifying situation. I was completely frozen, and all I could do was stare at the guy, which was probably the last thing I wanted to be doing. I couldn't help myself. Every time I was able to look away, my gaze immediately snapped right back to his eyes. He noticed, obviously, which wasn't too surprising. I mean, I was quite literally staring at him. I'm not sure what I was expecting him to do, but I definitely was not expecting him to smile at me. And then he said, calm as anything, "Don't worry, it's not my blood." As if that was supposed to make me feel any better. It didn't. My brain immediately started the emergency alarms, that this guy is a murderer. He might have just killed someone. He might kill me. Those were the only thoughts running through my brain, and I was freaking the fuck out. But then my survival instincts kicked in, and I started acting like everything was normal. I nodded at him like he had said something normal about the weather, and I buried my head back in the magazine. I watched him walk through the aisles like nothing was wrong. He grabbed some random stuff and came up to pay. I was actually kind of surprised that he wasn't going to just steal the items. I probably would have let him. I rang him up, careful not to look him in the eyes. The nightmare was almost over. He paid in cash, didn't say anything else, and left. The door chimed and he was gone, as simply as that. The second I heard a car engine start somewhere out in the parking lot, I grabbed the phone and called 911. I told them what I saw, and I tried to describe the guy as accurately as possible. I told them I didn't really know what had happened, but I was positive that something happened. The dispatcher was asking some clarifying questions when everything went sideways. I was mid-sentence when the door chimed again. Great, another customer. That was the last thing I wanted to deal with, but I was wrong. It wasn't another customer. It was him again, the guy I was in the middle of reporting to the police. He looked absolutely furious. I hung up the phone as fast as I could, but it was too late. He knew what I was doing. He must have seen me through the window. He stormed up to the counter and started demanding to know if I'd called the cops. I denied it, but he wasn't buying it. Not even a little. Things escalated quickly. He started cursing at me, telling me to mind my business and that he knew I was lying. I just put my hands up and didn't say anything, trying to defuse things as best I could, but there was nothing I could do. His voice was getting louder, and those empty eyes were suddenly filled with rage. At first, I thought he was just going to yell at me, but I saw it a second too late. He jumped across the counter and attacked me before I could do anything. I don't mean he climbed over it. I mean he launched himself across the counter and tackled me to the ground before I could even react. In all of 2 seconds, he went from screaming at me to strangling me, and I was fighting for my life. I thought I was going to die. I had never been in a physical altercation before that night, and I was certain this guy was trying to end my life. I thrashed around wildly, kicking, scratching, biting even. I was just trying to survive. I could feel his blood, or whoever's blood it was, all over me, smearing my clothes and face. We were still rolling around on the floor when I resorted to my final option. I screamed that I had a gun and I wasn't afraid to use it. A complete bluff, of course. Something about the way I said it must have been convincing though, because he stopped punching me. He scrambled off and bolted for the door. I was still on the ground in a painful haze when I heard his car speed out of the parking lot. I didn't even get up at first. I just laid there for a while, covered in a mix of someone else's and my blood. The police showed up maybe 10 minutes later. When they saw the state I was in, they immediately left and tried to track the guy down. I never heard from them again. There was nothing about it on the news either, so I was completely in the dark. The experience was by far the scariest physical thing that has ever happened to me. Okay, if you thought that was crazy, I promise you this one's worse. A few months after the first incident, I was still working at the same gas station, which was probably my first mistake considering what happened. But I needed the money. Also, there was a part of me that had convinced myself it was just a freak occurrence, a one-time thing that had no chance of ever happening again. But that's not the case. It was another late night when the next thing happened. Looking back, the circumstances surrounding the night were pretty much identical to that of the first incident. It was a late night, I was alone in the store, dying of boredom, etc. So anyway, this guy walks in the store and immediately catches my eye. The first strange thing I noticed was that he was wearing a suit, and not just any suit. This thing looked expensive. It was dark gray and perfectly tailored. He had no business being anywhere near a gas station past midnight dressed like that. My first thought was that he must be coming from a wedding or maybe some kind of corporate event. I mean, there had to be some kind of explanation for what he was doing. But even important people don't walk into gas stations in the middle of nowhere wearing nice suits. That just doesn't really happen, and I would know. The guy didn't browse or even so much as glance at the aisles. He clearly wasn't hiding his intentions, or just didn't care enough to. Instead, he walked right up to me. He didn't speak or even look at me. He just reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. At first, I was beyond confused, but then I looked down at the picture, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a picture of that guy who had come into the store with blood all over himself and tried to kill me. The photo wasn't 100% clear, but I was sure it was unmistakably the same person. I tried to mask my surprise, but I don't think I did a good job. I kept my face glued to the photo, but I could feel that man watching me. He didn't say anything at first, and when I looked up to meet his gaze, he just stared at me, like he was studying my face or reading my mind. I wasn't sure if he was expecting me to say something, so I didn't. It was painfully awkward, and then, after a really uncomfortably long pause, he finally spoke. His voice was surprisingly gruff, almost like he had just smoked a full pack of cigarettes. He asked me if I had ever seen that man before, and I immediately said I hadn't. It felt like the right answer, even if I couldn't explain it at the time. I just didn't want to get involved in any kind of illicit activity that was going on, and my gut was screaming, "Deny, deny, deny." The guy didn't respond. He just kept staring at me with these cold, calculating eyes that I couldn't read. It was really unnerving, especially given what he was asking me about. The silence was excruciating, and with every passing second, I lost confidence in the believability of my lie. Still though, I wasn't budging, and I was still pretty sure I had given a convincing answer. I won our little implicit standoff, and the guy finally reached down and picked up the photograph. As soon as he turned his back, I let out a huge sigh of relief, thinking everything was over. I watched him walk through the store toward the door, but right before he opened it, he stopped, and he turned back around to face me one more time, and then he just said, "I know you're lying." And then, before I could even respond, he was gone. I was pretty shocked by the whole encounter, more than I wanted to admit to myself. Being in that store all alone didn't feel safe anymore, and I didn't really know what to think. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out what the hell had just happened. Who was that guy? How did he know about the first incident? I wondered if he was a cop or a detective, or if he was something else entirely, someone connected to whatever that blood-covered man had been involved in. That's the thought that really freaked me out. I pretty quickly reasoned that if he had been someone official like a cop, he would have revealed his identity to me, which could only signify bad news. I didn't end up calling the police that time, partly because I wasn't sure what I'd even say, and partly because of the PTSD over what happened the last time I called the police. Nothing happened for a while after that night, though. I was a little shaken, yeah, and part of me was expecting something else to happen that night, but nothing did. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I started thinking something might have actually been wrong. I started noticing the same silver SUV in various spots throughout my day. At first, it was parked across the street from the gas station during my daytime shifts, which was normal enough, but then I noticed it in the parking lot of the grocery store I went to, which was a touch stranger. Once I saw it on my street, the alarm bells started to go off again. I'm not a paranoid person by nature, but when you see the same vehicle in several different locations over the course of 2 weeks, you start to wonder. I had a feeling I knew who it was, and I told myself the next time I saw the car, I would call the police and report it as discreetly as possible. I knew it was that guy who had walked into the store that night in a suit. It had to be him. The worst part about it all was not knowing how he'd figured out where I lived. Somehow, he tracked me down. You have to remember, I lived alone at the time. It's not like I had protection at home or a lot of people to consult on this. I don't know why, but I convinced myself things would blow over if I just ignored it. And of course, that was an awful way to proceed. About 3 weeks after he'd first shown up, I was jerked awake in the middle of the night by the sound of glass shattering. My first reaction wasn't to freeze or flee, but to fight. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed and ran into the living room. There was no one there, which I was able to determine in just a few minutes because the house was pretty small. There was something though. There, sitting in the middle of the living room floor, surrounded by broken glass, was a rock. Just a plain rock, maybe the size of a fist. There was no note attached to it, but I understood what it meant. In that moment, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. That guy had clearly been stalking me, and he was clearly involved in something awful and was trying to tell me something. I didn't know what that thing was, but I knew I wanted no part of it, so I caved. I quit my job the next day and started looking for other places to live. It took me a little over a month to find a nondescript apartment a few towns over, and I figured that was good enough. In that moment, I didn't see the SUV one time, but my mind was made up, and nothing happened after that. I was finally at peace, and I was actually able to find another job relatively easily. I ended up moving again not even a year later, this time way out of state, and that was that. But I still think about both experiences from time to time. Even though the first encounter was probably more life-threatening, it's the second one that gets me. I was never able to figure out why someone would go through all that trouble, stalking, harassment, intimidation, just because I'd called the cops on someone covered in blood. The only explanation I could think of was that he somehow thought I had a connection to that first guy, and I was harboring him or sheltering him or something. It's been years, and I've accepted that I'll probably never figure out the truth behind any of what happened. This happened about 8 months ago. The night in question, I was heading back from a job site about 3 hours from my house. I was beat. The job had taken longer than expected, and I didn't have the amount of caffeine in my system such exhausting work required. By the time I got back on the road, it was already past 10. I know a 3-hour drive doesn't sound too intense, but I had been working so hard that even the simple task of keeping my eyes open was a chore. Plus, my truck is several years old. I don't drive a fancy vehicle with assisted driving or anything like that, so it's not like I had the comfort of knowing my car would help with the drive. About 45 minutes in, I knew I needed to stop. My eyelids were doing that thing where they just kind of drift down on their own, and I was having to physically shake my head to stay alert. So I pulled into the next gas station off the highway. It was around 11 at that point. I filled up my tank, smoked a cigarette, and kind of stood there debating what to do. I still had over 2 hours of driving ahead of me, and I knew there was no way I'd make it. So I made the decision to take a quick nap and finish the drive afterward. I drove to the corner of the parking lot and turned my engine off. I was just going to go to sleep for a few hours right there. I've slept in worse places, it didn't seem like a big deal. I was out almost instantly. When my alarm went off, it felt like I had blinked and an hour had passed. I still wasn't fully rested, but I was definitely more alert than before, which was good enough for me. The lot was completely empty now. There had been at least 2 other cars there when I pulled in, and they were both gone. Without as much as a second thought, I started my truck and pulled back onto the highway. Things were fine for maybe the first 20 minutes. The highway was dead, and I was kind of zoning out. Not falling asleep per se, but just letting muscle memory take over. I was essentially on autopilot. At one point, I realized my truck was making some strange noises. It actually took my brain a few minutes to process what I was hearing as abnormal. That's how zoned out I was. I turned the AC down so I could hear things more clearly. There was this faint thumping sound coming from somewhere behind me. I turned around a few times, but didn't see any loose items bouncing around in the back seat or anything like that. I figured it was just something shifting around in the truck bed. One of my tools, maybe. Beyond speculating, there wasn't much else I could do. The situation didn't really warrant me pulling over, so I made a mental note to check it when I got back home, and I kept driving. The sounds continued, though. It actually started to bother me, and I ended up cranking the radio to drown it out. At one point, I slammed my hand against the hood of the truck and cursed out of frustration. Strangely, that seemed to work. For maybe 10 minutes after that, things were quiet. I was relieved, not because the noise was worrying me, but because it was genuinely ticking me off. The adrenaline from getting so worked up had woken me up a bit more, which was a good thing. But that increased alertness also cleared some of the brain fog, and I started thinking about how odd it was for a sound being made by an inanimate object to stop so abruptly as a result of my outburst. I had already eliminated the possibility that a faulty part in my truck had been making the sound, so the fact that slapping the hood could have caused it to stop was such a weird coincidence. I was in my head about it, debating whether I should stop or not, when out of nowhere, I heard a deafening crack come from directly behind me. It was not a normal sound, and it definitely wasn't a normal crack either. It was more like a crash, like someone had thrown a rock against one of my windows. The next 30 seconds were pure chaos and terror. I turned around in shock, and what I saw nearly made me lose control of my vehicle. There was a person standing in my truck bed, banging on the glass divider between the truck bed and the back seat with one of my tools. It was dark, but I could clearly see him. He was banging on the glass repeatedly, like a wild animal trying to claw its way out of a cage. The way he was moving was truly barbaric. I can't overstate that enough. I swerved uncontrollably, partly out of fear and partly to try and shake him off. I lost control of the truck and started spinning out of control. I genuinely thought I was going to flip, but all I could think about was the maniac who was trying to smash his way through the glass. I somehow managed to wrestle the truck back under control, and I skidded to a halt halfway between the right lane and the shoulder. I was too disoriented and terrified to think about how lucky I had been to avoid a wreck. And the moment my head stopped spinning, I ripped off my seatbelt. I don't know what came over me. I'm not the bravest person and I wasn't armed, but I knew I wanted to do something. I couldn't just sit there. I had to confront the psycho in the truck bed, if he was even still there. I threw the door open and ran around the truck. As I was approaching the truck bed, I saw a man in a hoodie climbing out. He jumped onto the ground and started running for the tree line off the side of the highway. I chased him for a few seconds before realizing that was a terrible decision. It was pitch black out there. I had no idea if he was armed, and we were completely alone. Wherever my bout of confidence had come from, it didn't last. In a matter of seconds, I was terrified all over again. I ran back to my truck and sped off without even looking back to see where that guy went. I drove for a little while and then pulled over again to inspect the damage to my truck. My brain was genuinely in shock. I couldn't think straight, and I started to feel what I can only describe as a panic attack. I calmed myself down and got out of the truck. The glass divider was destroyed. It wasn't completely shattered, but there were so many cracks in it that one more forceful impact would have taken it out. I climbed into the bed of my truck to see what he had been hitting the glass with, but something caught my attention before I could even figure it out. There was a foreign object in there that I didn't recognize. It definitely wasn't a tool. It took me a few seconds to realize what I was looking at. It was a trash bag. It was wrapped over on itself multiple times, like someone had been trying to keep it really secure. And it was small too, like the size of 2 fists. It looked wet, and as I crouched down to get a better look, I realized it smelled disgusting. It smelled rancid, like rotting meat or food. I didn't want to touch it, but I needed it out of my truck. I needed to be as far away from that bag as possible. So as gingerly as I could, I grabbed it and quickly chucked it toward the tree line. I didn't give things another thought. I immediately got back in the driver's seat and started driving away. As I was pulling out, I looked down at my hands and realized they were tinted slightly red. The bag had been coated in something red that was now all over my hands. It was sickening, but there was nothing I could do besides drive. I rubbed my hands on my jeans and tried to just make it home without going insane. I ended up keeping the incident to myself. I didn't involve the police, and it wasn't until weeks later that I even told my friends about what happened. I couldn't stop thinking about the encounter for days afterwards. I got a friend of mine to fix my glass a few days later without asking questions, and that was pretty much that. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't affected by what happened. Looking back, the only explanation that makes sense is that he climbed into the bed of my truck while I was asleep at the gas station, which makes sense because I don't have a bed cover. But he must have been lying completely flat there for most of the drive too, otherwise I would have seen him. I've never been in a life or death situation like that before. It was by far the most terrifying thing I've ever gone through. This happened back in 2017 when I was living in St. Petersburg, Florida. I've always been a homebody, so when my coworker Jenna, who was about 10 years younger than me, started relentlessly begging me to go out, I kept declining. She and another girl from work, Mira, were persistent though, and after weeks of asking, I finally gave in. I told Jenna I would join them for a night out the following weekend. As the weekend approached, Jenna came to my apartment. She wanted to leave her car there and have me drive, which immediately stressed me out. I had lived in St. Pete for 4 years, but since I rarely left my neighborhood, I knew nothing about local nightlife. The farthest I usually drove was 4 miles to the nearest Walmart. If I went any further, I'd be lost without my GPS. That evening, we got into my car and headed toward Mira's apartment. When we arrived, Mira wasn't quite ready, so we went inside and waited. Once she was ready, all 3 of us piled back into my car. Since I was driving, Jenna had to navigate. We eventually ended up at a busy club. We went inside, found a spot, and ordered some drinks. We hadn't been there long when Jenna said, "Hey, I'll be right back. I see someone I know." She then asked Mira to go with her. I remember feeling a sharp stab of annoyance. Why beg me to come out only to leave me alone moments later? But I waited. A few minutes later, Jenna and Mira returned, smiling. "My friend brought us around," Jenna announced, handing me a glass. I trusted her, she was my coworker, so I took the drink, as they did theirs. I believe Jenna's friend bought us 2 rounds each. It wasn't long after the 3rd drink that something felt terribly wrong. The room didn't spin, but a wave of thick, unsettling dread washed over me. I turned to Jenna and insisted we have to go now. The next few hours are a blur. I don't remember leaving the club, but apparently we did. The first thing I recall clearly is sitting outside Mira's apartment complex, still in the driver's seat of my car. I heard Jenna and Mira talking, and whatever they said, some combination of words I can't recall to this day, instantly triggered my fight or flight response. I didn't need to understand the words. My gut knew I was in danger. I slammed the car into drive and sped away. Whatever had been slipped into my drink was powerful. I wasn't a lightweight, and I'd only consumed 3 club drinks, which are often watered down. I was driving all over St. Pete, unable to focus, simply trying to figure out how to get home. But my mind was completely scrambled. At one point, I stopped at a red light. Suddenly, 2 figures appeared at my window, and then someone was pulling my car door open. I was in total shock. My car doors automatically locked the second I put the vehicle in gear. I still have no idea how they managed to open it. 2 strange men were actively pulling the door open, and the sight snapped me out of the mental fog just enough for me to hit the gas and flee the intersection. After that moment of sheer terror, the memory vanishes again. The next thing I remember, I was sitting in my car parked near a row of quiet homes. I was staring blankly at my phone, trying desperately to figure out how to operate it. But the drug had made me so paranoid and confused that the simplest action felt impossible. I looked around, saw no one, and convinced myself I was safe for the moment. I reclined the seat and fell into a deep, drug-induced sleep. I woke up around 5 a.m. with the drug wearing off. I was finally able to use my phone. I put on the GPS and drove straight home, collapsing into bed immediately. I woke up again around 11 a.m. to 20 missed calls, mostly from Jenna, but a few from a concerned friend. When I called Jenna back, she was frantic, demanding to know where I went. "What do you mean?" I retorted. "Your friend spiked my drink and I wasn't sticking around to find out what was going to happen next," I told her. Jenna then let slip a chilling line. "Well, the spiked drinks weren't meant for you." That casual admission was all the confirmation I needed that she was involved. She quickly told me that she would stop by later to pick up her vehicle. Before she arrived, the memory of those 2 guys opening my door returned with jarring clarity. Had it been a hallucination or was it real? I went outside to check my car, and there it was, The plastic casing of my driver's side door handle was completely missing. Whoever had been holding onto that handle when I sped away must have ripped it right off. The physical damage confirmed that the terror I felt wasn't a delusion. Someone had tried to get into my car while I was drugged, driving alone, and vulnerable. I was furious that Jenna had put me in such a predicament. I never spoke to her again. The moral of this terrifying story is simple, and it's the only reason I'm still here. Always trust your instincts. Your gut feelings are always right. I'm a teenager that lives in a lively coastal town in a small enough country. It's very popular among tourists during the summer and becomes quiet during the other seasons. The main attraction of our town is the beach that stretches a few kilometers down to these sand dunes that are great for a scenic walk. The hills within are easy to get lost in, but at the same time easy to make your way out of, as if you walk a kilometer in any direction, you're sure to be back on the beach or on the path that leads back to a car park. The walk from this car park is around 15 to 20 minutes, provided you make good pace, so you're never truly isolated there. During the day, you'll always see families with young kids taking a stroll down there, or somebody walking the dog. My point here is that the dunes are known to be safe during the day, and if you get lost in them, you shouldn't panic. This story takes place a few weeks after school started back up, so town is quieter and the evenings grow darker. My friends and I are part of the local scout group. Our group is split into 4 groups, being Beavers for ages 5 to 8, Cubs for 9 to 12, Scouts for 12 to 15, and lastly, Ventures for ages 16 to 18. We meet every Thursday from 7 to 9 p.m., whether it be inside or outside, it depends on the time of year. On this night, it was the Scouts' first night back after the summer break, so as per the tradition, we meet at the car park by the walk to the sand dunes, and the Scouts would walk down to the sand dunes. We would have the older Scouts hike up the biggest of the dunes, and then have the newer Scouts, the 12-year-olds, follow them so the older Scouts help the newer Scouts to reach the top. And when they do, they're officially considered Scouts. So the Scouts set off, while me and the other 8 Ventures stayed behind to practice our first aid for about 45 minutes. We did pretty well in that, and we decided we still had time to go to the dunes. The quicker walkers, including myself, reached the dunes first. The tide was fully in, so we weren't able to walk on the beach to the biggest dune, which was known as the Baldy Man, so we just walked through the other hills of the dunes. My friend and I, who I'll call Noah, were set on reaching the Scouts, who at this point had all made it to the top of the Baldy Man. We shouted back to our leader and the other Ventures what we were going to do, and another 2 people decided to join us, who I'll call Thomas and Ewan. The others were a good bit behind, so they went into pairs and split up in checkpoints so the 4 of the people going to see the Scouts were able to find our way back. So me, Noah, Thomas, and Ewan took off in the near pitch black dunes, tripping and falling all over the place, going up and down, hill after hill, while scraping our legs on the pointed grass and the occasional bramble. The moon illuminated the silhouette of the Scouts, and we were further away than we thought. We stopped to rest on a ridge where we looked back and saw another 2 Ventures looking towards us. We gave them a wave, and they returned it. I was closing my bottle of water, getting ready to run again, when Thomas shushed us all. He looked mildly concerned at first, but he seemed to shrug it off. We questioned him as to why he shushed us, to which he replied, "Did you hear that?" We shook our heads, so Thomas said he thought he heard something rustling in the bushes, but we put it down to the wind, although it was a very still night. After another 10 minutes, we were on the last hill before we reached the Scouts, and we were exhausted, but we pushed through and made it up to them. We said hello to our friends and Scouts, welcomed the new Scouts, and decided we had to head back, as it was now basically pitch black out. And again, we had no torch. We tumbled down the big hill, catching our footing again on the sand, and we began making our way back to the Ventures we saw on the ridge. We ran up and down the hills again until we made out the outline of the ridge we saw the Ventures on. They were still there. We were relieved to see them there, even though we knew they would be. Finally, the 4 of us made it up to them. I'll call the two Cormac and Alice. Cormac is a big guy muscle-wise and is known in school for his intelligence. He's about 6'3" and looks like he could beat up a bear in a fist fight. Alice is a quiet girl but very smart, both in school and in social situations. Even without a torch, I could see a look of panic on Cormac's face, along with Alice visibly shaking beside him. "What's wrong?" asked Noah, speaking all our minds. Cormac looks me dead in the eyes and says, "Were you walking around on your own down there?" Pointing down to a clearing in the hills where people might come to have a drink or a smoke. "No, I've been with the others the whole time. Why?" I replied, feeling my heart rate increase. I think all of us had the same realization at the same time. We could nearly feel each other's blood run cold. Alice and I saw a man with his hood up, dressed in all black, circling this clearing, obviously avoiding us. "We thought it was you at first, but it was too out of character for you," Cormac said, looking at me. I was about to speak, but Cormac kept going. He said, "When we waved at you from the other ridge, we hadn't seen this guy yet, but the minute you were off of it, we saw what I assume is the same guy standing where you stood, looking in your direction." It hit me then, and I had a constant shiver running through me. Thomas must have heard him moving around when we were up there. We were being followed. There's safety in numbers, so the 6 of us made our way down to the clearing where the man was spotted. "He didn't even have a torch," said Alice in a shaky voice. Cormac and Alice rushed toward the scouts to warn their leaders about the situation, while the other 4 of us stayed back and kept watch in the clearing. Cormac and Alex came back quickly after warning the scouts. It was oddly quiet now. We were terrified that this man, dressed in all black without a torch, circling the place, and most scary of all, alone in the pitch-black dunes, was going to jump out and attack. Luckily, that never happened. We hurried back to the car park, finding the last 3 Ventures along with our leader on the way back, notifying them of the situation. We were nearly out of the dunes when one of the younger scouts let out a scream which prompted all the others to run. Noah and I, leading the walk back, were the ones who rushed to the kid first. The poor child was in tears, and when we asked him what happened, he pointed to my left. There he was, the same man, standing on a ridge, just looking at us. Noah told everyone to run, as he said he saw a knife in the man's hand. The Ventures all carried the slower children back to the car park, which was safe as far as we assumed. I never saw the man's face, nor do I plan on finding out who it was. The scouts and Ventures were collected by their parents, who I assume all have their versions of the story, but only a handful know the full one. This happened when I was 22 years old. I was working as a bartender at a small dive bar a few blocks from my apartment. By no means a fancy place, just a bunch of locals who would come and get their late-night drinks or to watch whatever games were on. I started recognizing regulars pretty quickly, a lot of them older guys. After my shifts, I usually walked home because it was so close, and sometimes I'd have a couple shots with customers near closing time, so driving wasn't smart. The walk only took about 7 minutes, and I had done it so many times that I never really felt scared before. There was one regular who always made me uncomfortable though. His name was Jared. I knew this because of his credit card. He looked to be around his late 30s, maybe 38. He had thinning hair and always wore the same brown jacket no matter the weather. He never came in with friends. He would sit at the bar alone and try to talk to me the entire time, showing no interest in any of the sports games that would be on. But he'd usually be there later in the night anyway. He asked personal questions sometimes, and I always kept my answers short and tried to stay polite because that's part of the job, but I avoided encouraging him. One Friday night, he came in like usual around 10. He nursed one beer for almost an hour and just watched me while I worked. Not like he was intensively staring at me the entire time, but I'd catch him shooting constant glances at me and he would look away when I'd notice. Almost every time I walked past, he tried to start a conversation. Near the end of his drink, He asked if I wanted to hang out sometime outside of work. I told him I wasn't interested and that I like to keep my work and personal life separate. His face changed right away. He forced a smile, threw some cash on the bar, and said, "Yeah, whatever." Then he left without tipping, which he had never done before. I remember feeling relieved he was gone, but also a little uneasy about how fast his mood shifted. My shift ended at midnight. The other bartender came in to take over, and I counted my tips, grabbed my hoodie, and headed out the front door. The street was quiet like it usually was that late. I had just turned onto the next block when I heard someone say my name. It made my stomach drop right away. I turned and saw Jared, standing near a lamppost. I didn't even hear him walk up. He gave a small wave and started walking toward me. I stopped but kept some distance. He apologized for storming out earlier and said that he tends to just get nervous. I told him it was fine, but that I really needed to get home. He nodded and said, "I just wanted to ask one more time if I could get your Instagram or Snapchat or something. I promise I won't bother you." I told him I don't use social media. He stared at me for a second, then smiled in a way that made me uncomfortable. He said, "That's weird, because I've seen you on Instagram at the bar before." My heart started pounding, because now he was directly confronting me. I had no idea how he knew that. I just said, "Please leave me alone," because at this point, he escalated things beyond comfort. He kept smiling and said, "Okay, have a good night." I turned and started walking again, trying to stay calm. After a few seconds, I thought I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid, but when I glanced back, I saw him walking the same direction, about half a block behind me. I sped up a little. He sped up too. I slowed down, and he slowed down. It felt like a sick game, like he was some NPC in a video game programmed to match my speed. I kept walking toward my apartment building, hoping maybe he would turn off somewhere, but he didn't. When I reached my building, I crossed the street instead of going straight to the door. I stopped and turned around. He stopped too. He just stood there under a tree, mostly in shadow. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could still somehow tell he was smiling a little. I yelled, "Why are you following me? I don't want to have to call out for help." He didn't answer. He just stood there stiffly. I blurted out, "My boyfriend lives with me. I'm going inside to get him right now." That was a lie. I lived alone. I turned and hurried to the front door of my building. I hurried and punched in the code for the building. The door buzzed and unlocked for a few seconds. Right as I pulled it open, I heard fast footsteps behind me. I looked back and saw Jared running toward the building. I ran inside and let the door slam shut behind me. I didn't wait to see if it latched fully. I just ran up the stairs to the second floor. My apartment was at the end of the hall. I could hear the main door downstairs push open aggressively, and then footsteps hitting the stairs hard and fast. He made it in. I fumbled with my keys at the door, almost dropping them. I could hear him getting closer, his shoes slamming against each step. I finally got the key in the lock and threw myself inside, slamming the door and locking it just as he reached the hallway. A second later, his whole body smashed into my door. The impact literally shook the whole door and wall. I screamed and backed away, grabbing my phone. He hit the door again, harder this time, like he was trying to break it down. Then I heard another door open in the hallway and a man's voice yell, "What the hell are you doing?" The banging stopped. There was silence for a second, then footsteps quickly moving away. I looked through the peephole and saw my neighbor, an older guy who lived across from me. He was standing in the hall looking confused and angry. Jared was already halfway down the stairs, not saying a word. My neighbor knocked gently and asked if I was okay. I opened the door a crack, shaking and crying. I told him everything while he stayed in the hallway with me. He said he had heard the banging and thought someone was trying to break in. I called the police, and they came that night and took everything very seriously. I gave them Jared's name from his credit card at the bar, and the building owner pulled the camera footage that showed him running in after me. My boss gave them the bar footage too. The next day, an officer called me and told me they had identified him as Jared Perez, and that detectives were sending the case to the prosecutor. It would be treated as stalking and unlawful entry because he chased me into the building and tried to force my apartment door open. Hearing those words made everything feel even more real, but also a slight bit reassuring. I went to the courthouse the next day and filed for a restraining order. I had to tell a judge everything that happened, and they looked at the police report and the security video. The judge approved a temporary restraining order right away, and police served him with it soon after. I was told the prosecutor was moving forward with charges related to him trying to break into my apartment. I still worked at the bar for a while after that, but I stopped walking home alone at night. Even with the court order and the charges, I felt scared every time I came back to my building. I would check over my shoulder the whole walk and rush inside as fast as I could. Nothing like that ever happened again, but I never forgot this incident.